Fresh and
All right, welcome back to another episode of Fresh and Buds. I'm your host, Tommy Fresh, and you are all of my buds. It is episode 111. We are 11-1. Shout out to Bilbo Baggins. We got a great episode for you all this week. It is the lore episode for Bright Lights, joined by our friend Kale from DeadSummer Art, which is one of the best YouTube channels for Flesh and Blood in the world ever. And Kale is someone I feel very, very lucky to be able to call a friend, and he's just the best. So I always look forward to these episodes, and we always have a great chat, especially this one, because this was one that I needed his guidance and his ability to make me feel a little bit more excited than I was feeling. And I think he accomplishes the mission here. So we got a great episode. Before we get to that, I want to shout out to the Buds Discord, the Patreon, which you can find in the show notes. Great way to support the show, keep the mics hot, the lights on, and YouTube and Spotify. Give us a old rate, like, comment, subscribe, whatever helps the show. And beyond that, just keep on trucking along, and we're going to have a great time. And hopefully some time for Charmer at the end. All right, we are here with Kale from DeadSummer Art, who obviously at this point is a mainstay on the show, comes on to talk lore with us every single set, and it's always a blast. And this one should be a real blast as well, because this is a set that, you know, I'm going to be honest with you folks, I'm going to need some convincing on Metrix. Kale's going to have to put on his best salesman suit and sell this world to me, because, there's reasons, and we'll get to them. But before we do, Kale, how you doing, buddy? What's new?
Yeah, doing all right. Man, this spoiler season's been very interesting. I've just been looking at all the cards, and like for other sets, I could just look at the cards and be like, okay, I can kind of see maybe where it slots in. This set, I have no idea. I'm looking at these cards and I'm like, is this good or bad? Like, someone please tell me. I don't know. But all the cards, at the very least, are very unique in their mechanics. So I'm very interested to see what this set's going to be like. But we'll talk a lot about that today.
Yeah, I'm interested too mechanically. Right, because obviously I'll be playing limited with this set, and I will have to play against Dash.io and Max and Techno Boston. To me, it's like people always clowning me as a brute player. It's like, oh, all those no blocks. It was like, well, it looks like Mech's gonna have a lot of no blocks too with all these items. So it's going to be very interesting to see how it plays out mechanically. I'm very excited to play against some of these decks. Maybe even build Max. I think Max looks pretty cool. I'm down
Max
with a wrench. I think, and I'm gonna crank that Soldier Boy. I'm gonna age myself. Greg's been making that joke a lot, so I'm just stealing it from him. But before we get to all that, you did a D&D campaign or two at this point, or you're working on one campaign. You did some sessions with the Living Legends guys over there, who I'm hopping on the horn with Bill tomorrow to start the set review, which should be very exciting.
Hell yeah.
How have the D&D campaigns gone?
Yeah, actually very good. So last time we talked, I'd only recorded one session, but since then, the entire sort of Escape from Southmore story I was telling expanded out into a total of 3 sessions. So at the time of recording, and probably by the time this goes live, there's 2 sessions that have gone up, and I've got the 3rd. It's all done, recorded. I've just got to edit it. Obviously, spoiler video takes precedence over that, but I have to edit that. Overall, it was a blast. The guys, I want to give massive props to everyone that played, because they role played so well. Like, I've DM'd for multiple campaigns and different people in one shots, and these guys were just so easy to just roll with. Like, they were just rolling with the flow, rolling with the punches. If something went a direction they weren't expecting, they like picked it up, and still played to how their characters would react to the situation. And I guess out of all of them, I want to give the biggest props to Bill. Bill was so invested in like his character's potential storyline that I kind of drip fed him throughout, and it resulted in a bit of inter-party conflict, which is kind of what I was hoping, because that just makes things a lot more interesting when there's some conflict. He wanted to go one way and they wanted to go the other, and there was parts where they were likely to have killed one another if things had gone further than it did. which is really interesting. But yeah, Bill absolutely killed it. Like he gave me sort of a rough idea what he wanted for his character's story. And then he was like, all right, from here on out, my character doesn't know what the hell's going on. And he just kind of gave me the keys, and I was like, all right, let's take you for a spin. And yeah, he rolled with it. So yeah, well, for someone who, I guess, typically on the Living Legends podcast, he's probably the most quiet. Sure. Yeah, he kind of really came out of his shell during the D&D sessions, which was like awesome to see. So.
Oh yeah, well, everyone at this podcast knows Bill's old faithful. You need him to do something that, like, honestly, like, I'm forever grateful for Bill for hopping on and talking about every single card with me for 4 to 5 hours every set, and he just, I'm like, dude, are you sure? I'm like, almost like, are you sure you want to do this again? And he's like, oh yeah, love it. Like, and not surprised at all that Bill, like, stepped up to the bat or to the plate and hit a home run with the D&D thing as well. Now, this like kind of content has become pretty popularized over the past, 10 years. A lot more D&D content and podcasts and things like that. And to my knowledge, this is the first time you tackled doing content with it. And is there anything that you would recommend to any other creators who kind of want to tackle this RPG style content, and especially like if they want to do in the Flesh and Blood world or outside of it as well?
I guess the biggest piece of advice really is just to find a group that suits you and you suit them. So like it sounds a little bit snobbish, but I'm very picky with who I play D&D with, because I've played D&D with people that are great people, but they've just been absolutely atrocious to play with for one reason or another. Maybe they hog the spotlight and they don't give other people's characters a chance to sort of breathe and develop, or maybe they're very power gamery and they try to just like break everything I'm doing like too much. Like, I expect my players to kind of be a little bit tricky. And they did do that in the D&D session, Escape from Southmore. There was one particular thing Kale does in the 3rd session that I thought was amazing, and I had to let that roll. But yeah, find a group that is all on the same page as to what you want out of the sessions. Because if you don't have a group that melds, none of the rest of the stuff is going to actually work out. And then I guess after that, yeah, just roll with it. Come up with a core sort of story that you want to tell. And one thing I like to do with a lot of my games is find the motivations of your players and their characters, and then weave those into your story. So for this Escape from Southmore thing, everyone's character, they gave me like a little bit of backstory, and I ran with that and had it so each player had stakes in the story that made it worthwhile for them to actually adventure with one another. Because that's the biggest thing I find with some of my friends who create characters. I'm like, okay, why is your character adventuring? And they're like, oh, because they want adventure. And it's like, well, that's not a reason to stick with everyone else in the group. You need to have something that's driving you forward, because so many times I've had people that play these types of characters just get to a point where they're like, oh, I guess I'll follow you guys because I'm playing a game, so I kind of have to follow you. You know, their character doesn't really tie into the story at all. So, yeah, they're probably the two biggest things: find a group that you meld with, and make sure the players have like a character motivation that they can follow, and everything from there on out will be smooth sailing. So,
yeah, I mean, I have to echo that sentiment about the group because, funny enough, 2 nights ago I was hanging out with a friend of mine who was the first person I played D&D with. He was the DM, and we had fun. I enjoyed it, but you know, we had one of our friends there who is very much a min-maxer, and every combat was not like I'm going to do this. It's like, well, what would happen if I did this? And you know, like how much damage would that be, or how much damage does this? Like, no, man, just do it and find out. You know, like you know, you gotta just actually become the characters. And at first I was like, is this what D&D is? And then I realized, oh no, this is my buddy. He's just you know how he is. So, but. Yeah, no, I definitely agree, and obviously a great group over at the Living Legends podcast. Now, you mentioned spoiler video. At the time of recording, this is Monday. All spoilers are done, but as far as I know, you don't have a spoiler out. What could you possibly be doing over here? Now, by the time this podcast comes out, everybody will have seen it. Can you talk to us a little bit about this spoiler video and the amazing talent you got to work with?
So, during the time frame when I was kind of expecting everyone to start getting emails if they were getting a spoiler card, I got an email from Alex, and I was immediately excited because I was like, oh yes, spoiler card, you know, I got chosen again. And I always worry, you know, am I going to get chosen this time? And, you know, if I don't, it's fine. But, you know, it's always great to get given a spoiler card. But he sent an email and he said, look, I got something a bit different for you. I want you to spoil a card after all of the spoilers are done. And he's like, this is obviously risky because there are 2 people doing box breaks and there's a chance they could pull my card. So by the time everyone's watching this, they will know that the card that I have is another expansion slot card, which everyone thinks that all the expansion slot cards that are going to be spoiled have been spoiled. Because I think there's actually like 3 to 4 left, maybe?
I think something like that, yeah. At this point, who knows? I mean, after the box breaks, but yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, in terms of ones that are actually to be spoiled, there's only one left, and that's mine. And he said, you know, it's up to you if you want to take this risk. And I said, look, I trust you. If it flops, it flops. But if it doesn't flop, this will be really cool, and it'll take the community by surprise, you know? So yeah, I agreed to that. And I'd been working on the video for, I guess, the entire time that, you know, I've known this without really saying anything, which is different because normally I like to tease. I'm a big tease. I'll like jump in the official Discord and I'll be like, a couple hours before my spoiler goes live, I'll be doing like a little lore trivia, and every time they get a question right, I'll give them like a piece of the card. You know? So I'd done that for the past couple sets, but for this one, I'm like, nah, I gotta keep it a secret. So the only thing that I've teased, at least at this point that we're recording, is that little Mendacity radio hub thing. And in the entire post, I didn't mention I had a spoiler card. I'm just like, check out the new Mendacity radio hub with the new update 7.3, yada yada. You know, just to get people kind of questioning as to what was going on. Because yeah, I already had a couple people ask me, do you have a spoiler card? And a couple of them I had to be like, yeah, shh, don't tell anyone, you know? But yeah, and then you had reached out and you're like, hey, I didn't get a spoiler card. If you need voiceover work, let me know. And, you know, the day I got my spoiler card and I saw it, I was like brainstorming because I was just at work when I saw the email, and I had a couple hours till I knocked off, and I was like, okay, let's think about what I could do. And I'm like, oh, I could do this, I could do that. Maybe I could get Tommy to voice this. So yeah, I got you to voice Gambit, which is the radio host of The Foundry, which is the only independent radio station still left in Metrix that isn't corrupted by Mendacity. So yeah, no, you delivered your lines perfectly. It's exactly what I was looking for. Very very cyberpunk like. That was kind of the vibe I was looking for, and you delivered it perfectly. I mean, I kind of expected you to because you run a podcast, so I figured you know how to talk like a radio person. So
Yeah, well, I will say, I mean, first of all, I really appreciate you letting me do it. You know, when I didn't get a spoilers time, I was bummed, right? But I was like, well, what do I do? Do I sit around mope, or do I see if I can get involved somehow? And I was like, well, I always love your videos, so and we're buddies, so I was like, I'll reach out to Kale if you need some voiceover work, I'll do it, and it'll be a lot of fun, and I when you sent me the script, I was like, oh heck yeah, like this is awesome, and at this point everybody's seen the video, but like I had two ideas with how to do the the host. The first was like a shock jock, kind of like the classic, radio, like morning radio nonsense, which I ended up, it just sounded like, to me, just sounded like me doing a Flake impression. And I was just like, okay. I mean, and when you said you liked the other one better, I was pretty happy. The other one was, I almost like, not initially when I started doing it, but like, I hope you're not too familiar, but like, I don't know if you're familiar with Alex Jones.
I was about to say,
yeah. The Alex Jones, just wild right nut, wing nut kind of guy in the States.
Very paranoid.
Yeah, paranoid. Says things about frogs and whatever's going on with them. I don't know, but like initially I didn't even think about that. But as I was reading the lines, I was like, okay, I feel like I'm like Alex Jonesing a little bit. So, and I thought that it fit pretty well, and I'm glad that you liked it as well. And it put a real strain on my voice, but it was funny. Lady Fresh, when I was doing it, she was sitting right back here because she was working, and she was like, "Where did that voice come from?" And I was like, I was just trying out things, but it was very cool, man. It was very cool. So, can you shed some light as to, I haven't seen the card yet, and I think you agreed that I could live react to the card on the podcast, and I'm going to look at it in a second, but I want to ask you one more question. What do you know, like, the reasoning as to why post box breaks this spoiler video was so important to kind of like come after? Why was Alex so insistent about it?
I don't know. I think it's just cool factor. Unless there is some lore that he hasn't told me, because I actually asked for lore and he said, I'll give you some lore if there is some. And he actually came back to me. He's like, I wasn't able to get anything for you, which was fine by me. I was able to work around it. But unless there's like some extra story that's coming out that ties into it, but I wouldn't imagine so for Bright Lights. I could see it as maybe like, if they're going to release a story relating to this card, it would be sort of like a Morlock Hill situation where it's in between sets and it's not really tied to any of the sets that it's in between. But yeah, I don't know. I think he just wanted to do something a bit wacky and different, and trusted me with that. And yeah, I was very thankful that he was like willing to sort of put this, I guess, big risk into my hands to try pull off. But yeah, I don't know. I think he just wanted to do something weird. And I like what Alex is doing with spoiler seasons now, because we're getting those like really cool cinematic animated videos as well.
Oh yeah.
That are like voice acted and whatnot. The Bright Lights one was amazing. So yeah, I just like what Alex is doing, and I was like, I trust you. If you think it'll work, it'll work.
Well, that's the great thing about Alex. He's a big ideas guy, right? And part of that probably comes from, he's young, energetic, and really has pushed the boundaries of what LSS had done previously in terms of hyping people up and getting, certain publications on board. And, that might not be all him, but like definitely changed when he came on board. And it's been very, very exciting. Now, I'm going to pull up the card right now.
Sure.
Because I want to look at it. I've been, I'm going to have to pause the podcast, and none of you will be able to tell. It'll be seamless editing. All right, so I just watched most of the video, which was a great job. I didn't see the card yet. Kale's about to just send it to me so I can look at it. I'll put it up on screen as well for anybody watching on YouTube. Obviously, great job, Kale, on the video. It's very, very cool. People are gonna love it. Now, all right, hit me with the card. I'm gonna react. This is live reaction, folks. All these things for you. All right. Whoa. Oh. Oh my God. Okay. I mean, So this is. I guess we could talk about it. This is Slay, which is a great. I mean, it's about time we get that name on a card.
Yeah. Slay Queen.
for the listeners who haven't watched the video or are tuning in now, this is a red shadow instant. Obviously, no block or anything like that, and it costs 0. And says, destroy target angel ally. When light is made flesh, light too shall bleed. Vincent, the Iron Maiden. Holy smokes, this is very cool.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, I don't. So Brian Gottlieb swears that the Prism deck's really good. So this must also be really good. What are your thoughts? What were your thoughts when you saw the card?
I mean, the first thing was that artwork is gorgeous.
Oh, yeah.
Like this just slain angel is like so metal.
Mm-hmm.
The name is also very good. I love card names where it's just like one word.
Yeah.
Because that is very like almost iconic. As for its effect, it is kind of a niche effect, but it's a very good niche effect.
Mm-hmm.
Funnily enough, even though it has flavor text from Vincent on it, I think Vincent, out of the 3 shadow heroes that we currently have, is probably the last shadow hero that would actually want to use it. Because with Vincent's ability, if you play a shadow non-attack and just pay 1 life, your rune chant becomes unblockable and it pops all angels that they have because they try to break because of ward and it doesn't prevent it, so it just smashes through everything. So I actually think this is probably best used in Levire.
I would say so. And Chain and Blitz and I guess now the Living Legends format because Chain's going to be full power over there and Prism's going to be full power with all the new cards. This seems like, I mean, initially my initial reaction to this is like, oh, this is a great sideboard card in the Living Legends format, and probably it's like one of those things like once Prism becomes good in Classic Constructed, this is certainly going to be something worth considering for sideboards. Very cool. Obviously, just so I don't know. It's really, really, really neat. So, yeah. I mean, well, great job on the video. Awesome card.
Thank you.
Yeah, that really cool. I'm still just processing, just seeing it. Like I didn't know what to expect because when I saw the script, I saw Vincent was mentioned. I was like, what are we doing here? Like, like what's going on?
This is a mix set. What's going on?
Yeah. And it's honestly super cool. And yeah, props to you, my friend, for a great video.
Thank you. Yeah, the lore implications is what I'm most curious about because as I had said before, like they didn't send me any lore for it, but Alex did mention his very like lore sort of specific card, so it's hard to tell if that particular angel that's dead on the card is one that we've seen before. I was thinking maybe it's like Soraya, but it kind of doesn't look like her. I don't know, it's very hard to tell from the angle that the angel's laying as to like what angel it is exactly. But yeah, just the fact that an angel canonically has died is kind of pretty big because I mean, I consider lore-wise the angels to kind of be similar power level to the Emperor. And imagine if like Ursa or like Blasmafair or Nazareth died. That would be like bonkers in terms of story. But yeah, it's a very interesting card. Ability is probably a little too niche to be considered a good card, but it can still be pretty powerful if you find the right situation for it. So yeah, overall, it's a very cool card. I can't wait to actually get my physical copy.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I gotta say, it's super cool, and you said something similar about, you hinted at your spoiler last time, which is Morlock Hill, correct? Or no,
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
yeah, Morlock Hill, and you hinted at it was like, oh, I don't know if it's like really cool story wise, but I actually see some play in Blitz, which is ends up like, that's the beautiful thing about Flesh and Blood. Sometimes like, oh, this is too narrow, and then it's like, no, it's just narrow enough to like make some waves some places. So this one has some very obvious implications, and the flavor text here, the quote, "When light is made flesh, light too shall bleed," is kind of interesting to me, because I mean, it's just saying, like, once these angels are on our turf, they're done. Like you can't.
Yeah.
Like, this is not the right playing field, which might hint to me at the third set of that, like, trilogy, probably kind of trilogy sets, Monarch, Dust Till Dawn, and then Kale and Tommy's Light and Shadow Extravaganza. I'll expect a check when you name it that, LSS. But
Yep.
that maybe the light heroes are gonna say, hey, no, you gotta come up and play on our field, because we're getting our asses kicked here in Raids. So very, very cool. Very cool. Super stoked for everybody to see that, or everybody to have already seen it, because we're operating on the future. But very cool, Kale. Awesome job. Let's do some fresh faves, and then let's talk about Metrix. We'll address the elephant in the room, as it were, the big mechanical elephant. But before that, we hadn't talked, or when we last talked, Dust Till Dawn, we were on the eve before spoiler season and all that. So I want to know your favorite cards from Dust Till Dawn. So starting off, who's your favorite hero from Dust Till Dawn? I know, like, some just got more support, but we can count them.
I mean, take a guess. What do you think it is?
I mean, Vincent, right? I mean, like,
yeah.
has to be.
Yeah, Vincent. Vincent is just so... She plays so different. Like, so I made a deck for her, and I've been playing it a lot. She, at least the way I play her, she almost feels a little bit like a wizard, in just the fact that you really have to time when you do certain actions. So oftentimes I'll have a turn where it's just set up. I'll play, like, Read the Runes, because I don't have access to, like, an Eloquence token to give it go again. I'll just play Read the Runes. I'll banish, like, a widespread card of some sort, and then I'll just pass turn. And then my next turn, I'll, like, block a bunch with, like, my entire hand, and then the following turn I just dump the widespread. So yeah, it's very timing orientated. Yeah, it just really feels like a wizard for some reason. I mean, there is a little bit of, like, instant speed shenanigans you can do with, like, your Grimoire of the Haunt, and a few other cards. Like, if you play Rattlebones, or, like, Spellbound Creepers is also pretty good in her. But yeah, I like to play her more control-y, more tanky. That might just be me sort of coping at the fact that she didn't get given a shield, which I really wanted a shield. But it's good fun. I can play cards that normally you wouldn't play in, like, Viscera. Things like Runeblood Barrier is actually really good in Vincent. Like, I run 3 copies of that in my deck.
Oh, that's really cool. I mean, you know what? Like, based on her art and stuff, like, that feels like maybe it's like how she was supposed to be played, and we're seeing more like kind of like turn off, big turn, turn off, big turn. But I think maybe just kind of like sitting and waiting, because we haven't seen Vincent really, like, convert competitively. So maybe, like, that sit and wait for the opportune moments might be the way to go. But great choice. What's your favorite weapon?
Favorite weapon? I have 2, because I can't. I think Flail of Agony has to be my favorite. Simply because being able to swing with a weapon with no cards in hand is so good. Especially if I'm versing, like, Prism, which I do occasionally, or if I'm versing, like, a Dromai, I can swing out, pop a bunch of rune chants, sometimes I don't want to, but sometimes I have to, you know. But just be able to swing out and hit something that has Spectra for only the cost of 1 life is really powerful. Yeah, just like off turns, it's good. On turns, it can be good as well to finish off your combat chain if you manage to get go again. I typically play more of like a taller version, but yeah, it's just really solid. Yeah, it's just like the perfect weapon, really.
Yeah.
But I guess my other favorite weapon would be the weapon that I sometimes replace Flail of Agony with, which is Scepter of Pain.
Oh, yeah.
The fact that it's a weapon that doesn't actually pop your rune chance is sometimes very good. So if I'm in a matchup where I don't feel like I need to constantly put pressure on like off turns or like break a Spectra aura or something like that, I will run Scepter of Pain, and sometimes on a turn, just to set up, I'll flick some arcane damage at him and continue to build up rune chance. And that can also be really good because you're managing to stockpile all these rune chance. If you also combine it with Rune Blood Barrier, now you've got a ton of free damage prevention, which can be really good in certain matchups as well. So, and the artwork is just awesome. And the fact that you can use it in any rune blade is also very cool. So, you know, OTK Viscerize, something like that, you know?
Possibly. I mean, no more Rosetta, right? So, like we're not
it's gone now.
Chained up by Rosetta anymore, you know? No, those are the great answers. Now, what's your favorite equipment?
Favorite equipment? Surprise, surprise, these are also rune blade things.
Right.
So the first one is Grimoire of the Haunt. I mean, if you're playing Flail or Scepter, because neither of them have go again, there's kind of not a reason to have another one-handed weapon. So to have the book can just be like a great support piece. It's for Vincent, it's strictly a better Arcane Lantern because it has Arcane Barrier 1 plus it has extra abilities on it. You can pay 1, instant speed, get an Eloquence token, which can help you really combo off on certain turns. So, say for example, at the start of my turn, I've banished like a widespread card or some other big card that I can play if I rune gate it. I could do something like pitch 2 cards, get a Eloquence token from my Grimoire, play Rune Blood Barrier to get an additional 4 rune chance, and then just dumps the opponent with a rune gated like widespread annihilation or something like that, just straight off the bat, which can be really good. So it's just a fantastic like support piece. Some games I don't use it at all. Some games I use it like very early or late game. I'm not upset that it's ever in my offhand, if that makes sense. There's nothing really better to use at the moment, so you know, I'm more than happy to use it as is. Plus, it looks amazing in cold foil. I actually went and bought a cold foil. So,
I mean, it really does.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was the other one? Is it? Can I guess?
Sure.
Is it the Carapace?
It is. Yeah. Yeah. Mostly just because that's just it's just so solid. Like, it's always, at least for the foreseeable future, it's probably always going to sit in my sideboard. And I will use it quite often in certain matchups. So if I feel like I'm up against someone who really benefits from like on hits and I need that little bit extra defense, I'll run it. If I'm up against Wizard, I'll run it. Yeah, and just the design of it as well. The fact that you have Arcane Barrier 2 and a defense of 2 is that just screams Runeblade, because Runeblade is all about the weaving of, you know, magic and might together. So, and the artwork's just gorgeous too. This is the type of card that realistically you could put this effect in another class, but it wouldn't make as much sense if it was outside of Runeblade. And yeah, it's just really cool. I did manage to actually pull one in my booster box that I got, because I got a booster box. I always get a booster box of every set regardless. And unfortunately it wasn't, you know, extended art cold foil, but you know, I'll take it. So I get to play with it.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. It's just like kind of like classic Flesh and Blood, if that makes sense. Even like the art, right? Because it almost feels like it is the chess piece for Arcanite Skullcap, and it has similar feels to that. Even though Arcanite Skullcap, obviously generic, whatever, but it just feels like that, and super cool. great art. The extended art is pretty insane. Most of them are.
Yep.
Now, what's your favorite run-of-the-mill card? Non-attack action, instance attack actions.
Yeah. I'm just all about Vincent for Dusk Till Dawn, honestly. I've just mostly been playing her, so it might not be that good, but I have a lot of fun playing it, and I will sometimes force my sort of game state into a state where I can actually play it, and that's Oblivion. I was actually lucky enough that one of my regular players that sort of plays in my locals, Rachel, she normally plays Levia herself. She actually pulled a cold foil Nazareth token, and she's just like, "Here you go, you're gonna play it." And I was like, "Oh my god, thank you," you know. So she just gave me this sick token, and I'm like, "Well, I gotta actually play it now." So, you know, it's a little bit hard to get out sometimes because you need exactly 6 rune chants. So if you're at a point where, you know, you can't quite play it yet, but you're on 6 rune chants and it's like the opponent's turn, if it gets back to your turn, you're forced to banish a card from hand. And if you do so, you get a rune chant. So now you go from 6 to 7. So you've missed your opportunity and you have to break them all to sort of reset. But sometimes I've been in a situation where I'm like, now's not the time to play it, but I want to play it like maybe the turn after. So I will purposely block with every card in my hand. So when it comes back to my turn, I don't have to banish a card, and therefore I don't get a rune chant, so I stay at 6. And I'm like, all right, let's hope I draw into it, you know?
Yeah.
So, which I've done a few times, but I think the last Classic Constructed event we ran at our locals, in all 3 games I played, I managed to summon Nazareth, and that was just so fun. You know,
awesome.
it can be quite swingy, but I find most of the time as well, every time I get Nazareth out, she ends up getting killed immediately the following turn. But,
well, you know,
it is
think
what
of
it
it
is.
like another Carrying Husk. Is just prevented another 6 damage coming at you.
Exactly. Yep.
I haven't
but yeah,
seen it
I guess-
played yet, though. It's just I'm actually impressed
really?
to actually hear you say this because I have not seen anybody play it, and I thought it was the coolest card. Like, I mean, obviously as a big Doomsday player, I was like, I'm all in on whatever this is. So yeah, no, really cool that you're actually playing the card.
Yeah. You know, I'm not the most competitive player. I try to just play cards that I think are cool, even if they're bad. So, but yeah, I guess outside of that, obviously I got to say Morlock Hill, the card I spoiled. A funny little thing about Morlock Hill. So when it got spoiled, I was talking in the Discord, the official Flesh and Blood Discord, and I offered a challenge. I said, I don't think this card will see any play that will actually be like in a competitive environment. If you manage to play this card and it is the sole reason you win your game, I will give you some sort of prize. Lo and behold, someone got back to me maybe a month later and they're like, hey, I don't actually want the prize, but I figured you'd want to see this. And they were playing in a skirmish event and they were playing Kasai, and I think, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, I think they were versing a Kano. The Kano went to do some stupidly big, like, arcane damage in one hit.
Mm-hmm.
And they had Minerva in their arsenal, and they had Morlock Hill in their hand, and they played it out. They prevented the damage, and because the Kano sort of expended everything, they were on the back foot. Kasai swings in because Kasai is really good in Blitz, and got the win. So I was very impressed. I was totally willing to give this person a prize, but they're like, nah, it's all good. I just wanted to show you. So yeah, it's cool that someone actually, you know, rose to the challenge and actually did it.
Yeah, I mean, and especially now that I guess Blitz has sideboards. I don't know if they changed it back. Yeah, but it opens up that card quite a bit, which is very interesting. And you know, I was with you. I was like, I don't know if and like maybe it's my stupid CC brain that's just like always like Blitz, what's Blitz? But you know, it's really cool, and I think Slay is also going to see play. I mean, it has to, right? Like that's kill one thing for free. I don't know. I think I'm in on it.
You can't play it from the banished zone, and most Shadow heroes are going to be putting things in the banished zone, so I could see it being a downside there. But you know, I'm not going to be upset if it doesn't get played. I just think it's a cool card. You know,
it fills up the graveyard for Levia. We'll say that it's not a 6, but if you're at 2 cards and you need that third one, and they have an angel. we're off to the races with Slay. But all right, Metrix. So
Yes.
Kale. Okay. I gotta like basically rein my thoughts in here. So
Give me the lowdown.
Metrix is something that was always a problem to me, and I know you had listened to Butters Bellow, and you had said, oh, we'll talk about this. We have a lot to talk about, and we always do. And so Metrix is this city in Wraith where pretty much everywhere else it's like magic and swords and clubs. Like it's like me. Like I like fantasy, axes, like clubs, swords, like spells, all that stuff. And then Dash is this like steampunk character, from Arcane Rising. And whatever, like it was one character, and I was like, okay, it's kind of interesting. Gives it's a little bit of something for everyone. I understand that you kind of have to service everyone, but the one thing that was always weird to me is like, how does this technologically advanced city exist in Wraith without it really, outside of I guess the pits where we see it the most, it really affecting the rest of Wraith, in my opinion, and then. On top of that, like, sure, it was a lot of steampunk stuff, and I would also defer people to go watch Dylan from Gorganian Tomes video did a great kind of history of steampunk and whatnot. But then we start seeing cards come in this weekend, and I'm like, oh, this is no longer steampunk. This is Iron Man. This is like Ultron. I think somebody said, oh, Tekla is his Ultron. And I was like, it does look like that. And like, we got a lot of really high technological stuff, big artillery tanks and stuff. Not to say, I don't want to discount that stuff's not cool. I enjoy that stuff too in the setting that makes sense, right? And I think what I'm asking you, Kale, is, well, can you make sense of this for me to make me kind of be able to sleep at night when I'm playing with bright lights the next couple of months?
Yeah. So I've thought about this a lot. I think the crux of the argument for this doesn't really fit isn't so much that the basic fundamentals of Metrix exist. So things like Steam. Mm-hmm. So reading into the lore, Metrix started off mostly with just Steam. Mm-hmm. And if you think about a fantasy setting, I mean, Flesh and Blood is a high fantasy setting, so there's magic and stuff. So it's kind of understandable that things like Steam power and constructs could feasibly within the world make sense.
Yeah.
I think the real thing that a lot of people have issue with is where it starts to get really high tech. So things like computers, we have like, I guess things like motorbikes isn't too much, but like neon lights and like this mech suit stuff and artillery tanks, as you said. I think that's really where people start to, I guess, have an issue with it existing in the world. So I've thought, why would this make sense in Flesh and Blood? So looking at Metrix as a whole, compared to the rest of Wraith, you see very little of Metrix's influence outside of Metrix, as you said. We do see a little bit in the pits. The Iron Assembly that runs Metrix has been known to run Metrix with, pun intended, I guess, an iron fist, where they're very stern. We don't know exactly their motives, at least at the point of recording, but it seems like they want to keep people under control for some reason. And that also comes into play with Mendacity, the like news corporation that buys out any competition that goes against what they want to do, and anyone that does go against what they want to put out into the public, like anyone that goes against that, they mysteriously disappear under unknown circumstances. You know, they take care of the competition. So there's a element of wanting to remain separate from Wraith that Metrix seems to want to do. So I think it's less of how come people haven't taken that technology out of Metrix, and more so, why is it being restricted to just Metrix? Because The only other real bits of like Metrix influence that we've seen outside of Metrix is things like the black tech, which, from what we understand, appears to be some sort of contraband technology that's been smuggled out of Metrix, which implies that why would you need to smuggle it out of Metrix if this is like any other normal society? You know, you should be able to buy the technology and go back to your home in Solana or Mysteria and use your, you know, Steam Tech Lantern or whatever it is you've got. But the fact that they have to smuggle stuff out implies to me that Metrix wants to keep their technology to Metrix, because, I mean, if you think about it, you can almost see it as a form of tourism.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to experience all this technology, you have to go to Metrix, which brings business to Metrix. It brings people that want to live to Metrix, which is just overall good for the city. Whereas if you allowed all that to spread across Wraith, suddenly the thing that you're most well known for isn't that special anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of my biggest theories is, I feel like the reason why the technology hasn't spread might have something to do with whatever Asia is tied to Metrix. So at this point in time, it seems very obvious from the patterns that each region has its own Asia that the region is sort of based on. So Volcor, we have the Asia of Flame. Solana, we have Soul, etc., etc. I think something is going on with whatever the Asia is for Metrix, maybe the Asia of innovation or invention. And I think maybe the Iron Assembly has something to do with it. I think maybe the Iron Assembly are in the pocket of this Asia, similar to how the Emperor is with the Asia of Flame. So I think there might be something there that we just don't know yet as to why it hasn't spread. Yeah, that's kind of my base thoughts as to whether or not this really fits in the world. Because realistically, we've seen things like this happen in real life as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, there's an island, I think it's maybe not too far from Australia, actually. It's called North Sentinel Island. It's very famous because the Sentinelese people that live there are one of the few remaining tribes of people that have not sort of had outside influence from the outside world. They don't have technology like we do, and anytime we try to go near them, they shoot arrows at us, or the occasional person that goes onto the island for whatever reason ends up dead. So, you know, it's kind of a similar thing to that, where you think in our current world that we've progressed so much that the outside world also must have progressed, or in this case, it's kind of the opposite. This small island must have also progressed along with us. But realistically, if they close themselves off, there's a chance that any technology that you develop on one side won't cross to the other. And I guess another thing to back this up as well, this is something that Gulgani and Tome actually mentioned in his steampunk video, which is really good. I recommend everyone to watch that. Is that whilst this technology could, say, for example, Metrix is totally fine with you coming to their city, buying their tech, and taking it back to Solana. How are you going to upkeep it? If you don't know how it works, how are you possibly going to maintain it? Because these things, they're not perfect. I mean, we've seen in plenty of artwork and just mechanics of cards that these things do break. I mean, a lot of the items, you have to break them in order to do something, or you have to scrap them. So that is also another element as to why this stuff might not have spread. And I think it's perfectly reasonable, depending on how old Wraith is, that Metrix might have sped ahead in terms of like the scientific race. But yeah, I think in that regard, the reason it just hasn't spread is for some reason that we don't actually quite know. So I personally don't have that big of a problem with them having things like computers. I mean, computers is kind of pushing it a little bit. But I could definitely see that being a normal thing in the world. I mean, that's kind of happened with us. We've exploded with our technology over the past 50 odd years compared to 50 years prior to that. We were just learning how to fly.
Yeah.
I think it was something like 60 odd years between the first plane and us landing on the moon.
Yeah.
So, and we know from recent lore stories that Techno Boston, who is responsible for the creation of essentially electricity, but he calls it dynamism. Like, he died at least in current story, he quote unquote died. I think he isn't dead, but he died or disappeared 50 years ago. So that's a lot of time for technology to progress. He also progressed technology a lot while he was alive. So yeah, I think it's sort of the natural progression of humans to learn and evolve at this sort of speed, and yet still have the outside world sort of stay in that sort of stagnant classical fantasy trope, you know. And I mean, there's also magic in the world, so it's like, can you really you really argue against technology as well? So
I understand that. Like, obviously, you know, you could say science and technology is a form of magic, and can be looked at as so. And I can maybe buy the idea that Metrix is like trying to keep it all in, and, you know, that would explain a lot of the existence of the pits, you know, kind of this like dredge kind of like they're trying to like just survive on the scraps of this like high society where you know the lower, you know, impoverished class is having to survive on what they can get from that, because they aren't welcome within that high society. So I guess that brings up the question, like, do you think that at some point, right, like a lot of these places are under attack, and I'm not sure why these tanks exist. I don't know what the conflict is right now, because I haven't had a chance to look into it. I hope you'll be able to enlighten me on what the conflict is, why these tanks are needed. And I guess I asked that about America too. I mean, why do we need tanks? When's the last time we used a tank? But you know, maybe this is stemming from my own distaste for my own government with Metrix. Like, what are you guys doing? But, you know, it's such an interesting thing, because like at some point, you know, the Shadow is attacking Solana. If they beat Solana, aren't they going to come for, like I said in the video, like, hope that they don't come knocking on my door? Is the Shadow not going, or like, are they going to stop at Solana, or are they going to keep going? And well, how do tanks match up against demons? Like it's hard to say, but you know, and if Metrix was defeated, all of a sudden is this technology spread around the world of Wraith and whatnot? I guess there's so many questions here. I don't know. Like, what do you think? Like, where does Metrix go from here, and why? What's the conflict in Bright Lights that requires tanks and guns and all this fun stuff?
Yeah, so we haven't gotten too much of the story at the point of recording this. We have, I think, one more article to come out, which I think is going to be the most important. But we've had stories for each of the three heroes that we've got so far. I'm really drawing a lot of comparisons between the story of Bright Lights and sort of the way Metrix is run to the story of the Cyberpunk universe, which I'm also a pretty big fan of. So in that universe, corporations have sort of taken over in terms of like hierarchy and power level compared to the government. So the government is much weaker than the corporations in that universe. And I feel like that's very similar with Metrix. And in the Cyberpunk universe, they had a lot of wars, which were called the Corp Wars, or the wars between the corporations, where instead of countries fighting each other, it's these corporations fighting each other for control over markets and sort of client bases. So I have this inkling that maybe all of these tanks and stuff that we've seen are a symptom of ongoing tensions between corporations like Cogworks Conglomerate, which are kind of the founders really of Steam technology, and Techno Industries, which has been the ones to create dynamism, which is their form of electricity. So, I mean, we even see a little bit of conflict, like just, I guess, social conflict between Cogworks and Techno Industries in some of the stories. So I think that's the reason why they've got these tanks. Plus, if you can consider the regions of Wraith as kind of like countries, any country would want its own fighting force in case they do get attacked. I mean, Solana has one, Aria has one, Volcor has one. So it doesn't surprise me that Metrix is taking advantage of the technology that they have and using these like automatons and constructs to fight any battles that they may have. So yeah, that's kind of my reasoning behind why I think these things exist, really. So
and that makes sense. And if this is, I mean, I'm not really read up on the cyberpunk world, but you know, I mean, it seems so far fetched that corporations have more power than government. I mean, that's a joke, folks. But you know, but anyway, but it's very interesting. Like I'm trying to give Bright Lights the benefit of the doubt. I think the really high tech stuff threw me for a loop, right? And maybe that's why I kind of have been drawn to Max, right? Because Max seems kind of like, well, he's kind of big wrench. I mean, you don't really need a big wrench for a lot of high tech stuff. I guess you just need it, I guess, to bash people over the head and then to crank things. But that actually is a good spot to head to. Like, where are these three heroes within this story?
Yeah, so I guess the most important one would be Techno Boston. So his full name is Jules Techno Boston. So he is the founder of Techno Industries. And he was a man that really prided himself on work to the point where he foregoed any sort of family, relationships, friends, leisure time to just solely focus on his work, and ended up sort of costing him his physical health, from what we understand. He really embodies the tagline of Bright Lights, which is become more than human. Because he was all about evos and supplementing the human form with these techie devices that you put on yourself, which makes a lot of sense because in the sort of story bit that we got, we see him actually in a wheelchair to the point where he can't walk. So it makes sense that in order to sort of regain his physical health, he would replace, you know, his human flesh with technology, something that he made and understands. So that's Techno Boston. Canonically, within the story, from what we know so far, he died 50 years ago. He died in his laboratory, apparently burnt alive. How true that is, I think it's a bit of a farce. I think he's still around, but in a different way. He actually shows up in the little story for Dash, where he shows up as a hologram. And at first it seems like he is just an AI program to sort of repeat the same things over and over again. But we kind of get a hint of sentience. So I actually kind of think that maybe Jules Techno Boston is in a space which I only found out about today called Eidolon, which is kind of like, I guess, like the internet or the cloud or virtual space. It's this realm of just pure data that sort of seems to permeate all of Metrix. It's the thing that, I don't know if this is confirmed or not, but I believe this is probably what Datadol is linked up with, because Datadol is kind of this tool that passes all the information from Metrix and passes it onto the Iron Assembly to do with as they wish. But yeah, so I think Techno Boston is still alive, and we kind of get a hint of that with the card Singularity that we've seen so far. We don't know exactly everything that it does, but it seems to me like the other side, he's going to transform into some sort of AI program, and he's going to be there in cyberspace, you know, being all mystical and whatnot. And then we have Dash. We obviously know a lot about Dash so far. In this story, she actually manages to infiltrate the Iron Assembly's headquarters, finds Datadol, and actually takes Datadol out of the Iron Assembly with her. She removes the microprocessor from the back of Datadol's head and just starts running off with Datadol to show her the world, which is pretty cool, because she actually asks Datadol, like, do you agree with everything the Iron Assembly is doing? You know, all this control and these enforcers that they send out to take care of people that are sort of going against their agenda. And Datadol's like, I'm just a tool, you know, it doesn't really matter what I think. And Dash is kind of like, well, let me free you and, you know, kind of show you what it's like to be human. Because from what we've heard of Dash so far, especially in the Bright Lights trailer, she does like the idea to an extent of humans sort of augmenting themselves, but she doesn't want to lose her humanity. She wants to still kind of remain human. She's kind of the in-between in terms of that sort of like moral question or moral quandary between Techno Boston and Max, who we'll get to in a second, because Techno Boston is all about becoming more than human, and Max is just about destroy everything. You know, technology kind of sucks to an extent, and Dash is kind of in between. She's the mediator. So that's Dash, and then we have Max Nitro, who is very interesting to me. He is the pure definition of a cyberpunk. Yeah. This is a punk rock kid. He's anti-government, anti-authority, up yours, you know, I'm going to smash everything I don't like and steal things that I do like. His kind of story at the moment, from what we understand, is he grew up in, I believe it's called the Rosario Orphanage within Metrix. And he grew up actually alongside Lena Bell, who I know you've mentioned before, who is an alchemist that we've caught glimpses of, and Ricky, who is a good friend of Dash and is actually the guy that you see on the card Snatch.
Oh, okay.
So all three of them. Oh, he's also on Optical Monocle as well, Ricky. I keep forgetting his last name, but so he grew up in an orphanage with them, and he's kind of lived through the more impoverished side of Metrix, and because of that, he's always been under the thumb of the enforcers and wants to rebel. He's a rebel at heart, really. And currently in the story, from what we know, he was friends with Dash and wanted to go with Dash into the Iron Assembly headquarters. And when he stumbled across Data Doll, he wanted to destroy her because Data Doll was the reason why his friends kept getting caught by the enforcers, because Data Doll has been passing all this information and kind of is a little bit like a surveillance system for Metrix. So he wanted to destroy the tool of the authority that's sort of been ruling over him. But then he gets into a bit of a fight with Dash, because Dash is like, yeah, they are surveilling us, but Data Doll is also responsible for things that help us, like the hospital and healthcare system, the sewerage system, you know, things that are kind of necessary for humans to live and aren't evil. But you know, Max wants to destroy it, so him and Dash have a bit of a fight, and Dash wins and knocks him out. So yeah, he's kind of got this vendetta. He keeps calling her the Princess Teklo, I think is the name, because Dash comes from a very sort of upper class lifestyle, because she's the daughter. They actually kind of retconned this. Initially, they said that Dash was the daughter of the founder of Teklo Industries, which would be Techno Boston. But as of Bright Lights, they've actually retconned it to say she's just the daughter of some top scientists from Techno Industries. So she's not directly related to Techno Boston like she was initially when she was released. But Max keeps, you know, getting at her and prodding her because she's lived this upper class life. She's a princess to him, and he's just that, you know, that poor schmo that's been stuck on the street corner, you know, picking out of garbage bins for food. So yeah, that's kind of like the three heroes that we've got from Bright Lights, and I guess sort of their storylines. So Max just wants to destroy everything, and Techno Boston wants to ascend, and Dash is kind of in between, trying to figure out, you know, the best way to sort of move forward, because she has kind of learnt a little bit about what Techno Boston did. There's some sort of studies and research that has been happening in Techno Industries that she hasn't been made privy to, and she wants to know what's going on. And this microprocessor that was in Data Doll happens to be a newer model than has been publicly released, and something's going on with what Techno Boston wanted done after he died and whatnot. So there's still a bit more to discover of Bright Light's story, but that's kind of the gist of sort of what's going on at the moment with our heroes. So it's all very interesting stuff.
It's an interesting juxtaposition between the three heroes, especially, you know, what they're all doing. And Max Nitro, as I said before, it might be the one I relate to the most, right? Kind of like this technology. Like I mean, you know, I know it sounds crazy to complain about it while I'm on a Discord call into a really nice mic with two screens in front of me, but Some days I just want to throw it out the window. So, but it's interesting. Max Nitro has this kind of rebel spirit. It sounds like to me from the story that if it can be corralled and used in a productive way, he could lead some kind of resistance, which also leads me to believe it would be a really neat kind of team up of Max Nitro and Phi at some point, because Phi is leading a fiery resistance and Max Nitro doesn't have, like, he just wants to destroy things, but he doesn't know how to express that in an organized way to really get anything done. What is, like, all of a sudden, like, this Phi character is like, well, I led a resistance, and let me show you a few things. This is all just speculation, but it would be kind of neat. There's certain parallels to those characters and the fieriness of them. So pretty interesting. What are you most excited to play with from the set?
So when Arcane Rising was first sort of, we'd started seeing some rumors of what it was and the heroes in it. Initially, I was drawn to Dash because I do really like the sort of technological artificer side of fantasy. But then obviously Viserai was also a part of Arcane Rising and he took my attention. So I didn't play too much of Dash, but yeah, I don't know. I think Max Nitro is definitely the thing most interesting to me, just because I really resonate with that character. I think he's really cool. And his game plan is also fairly straightforward from what we understand. He just wants to pump out hyperdrivers, get boosting, just crank out a ton of attacks, for a lack of a better pun. Crank out. And yeah, he's just like, I don't know, really aggressive play style in like a unique way, which is really cool. And that really seems like he really seems to play up what mech, at least initially, was when we first found out mech before Bright Lights. Mech is so much more now with all these new cards and these items and these evos, but Max Nitro really brings it back to the basics of mech, which is really cool. But then again, evos are also really cool. I want to know how viable like an evo strategy is. Even if you use evos in someone other than Techno Boston, will they still be as worthwhile? Obviously they won't be as effective, but they've got some really powerful effects, and I like the idea of maybe like trying to recur some of your evo stuff, because there's some weird ruling where if you play some of the instant speed evos like during an opponent attacking you, you can actually like block with something, and then if you transform it, it actually removes it from the combat chain. But I think the ideal timing is like after damage calculation, but before the chain link resolves, you can like transform it to prevent temper from breaking or something along those lines, or blade break from breaking. There's some weird stuff you can do with it, which just seems really interesting. So I guess they're the two things that I'm most interested in. And I mean, my partner, she plays very casually and she really likes Dash, so I'm gonna have to get her some more Dash stuff in this new set and upgrade her deck. So I don't know, it's all kind of interesting. At first I wasn't that interested because it's all mech and I don't play mech, but I don't know, it just seems really fun to play. So
yeah, I mean, they did a good job with coming up with three really distinct heroes that feel very different, right? And it's going to be tough to see what the viability is, right? And obviously, this is not really a competitive focused episode, but like, who knows? This is going to be one of those things. I'm really reserving my judgment, and this conversation alone's helped me definitely get a little bit more excited, because I have to talk about these cards for like 4 or 5 hours this week when I'm doing the set review, which I'll be honest with you. At first I was like, oh, how am I going to do this? But, this has helped, but I'm really going to reserve my judgments for actually playing with the cards. And I don't know how to build mech decks, right? Like, it's just not, and the item thing, like, this seems really good, but it doesn't block. And like, what if I'm stuck with all these in my hand? My turns just play an item and go. It's that's stuff that I worry about. So I'm gonna have to reserve my judgment for also when the people who know what they're doing build the decks, and I can actually play around with the decks that they built, and I can be, okay, I understand what's going on here. And regardless, you know, I don't want to ever come off as like, you know, this is the worst decision ever LSS has ever done. That's not what I want to come off as. I just want to say, like, this is certainly not for me. That doesn't mean it's a problem if it's for anybody else. And I'm excited for those who it is for. You know, just like I hope that those people are excited for when the Savage Land sets come out and everybody can see how dumb everything gets and how really, you know, really awful all the cards are. So I don't know. Very exciting, but we got some listener questions, Kale, if you're down for them.
Yes, I am certainly down.
All right. Well, the first one comes from, well, actually, I should say, if you want to submit questions for any podcast, well, not any podcast, just this podcast, but any episode of this podcast, the Buzz Discord is the place to be, and that's in the show notes as well. First question comes from the Grave Key, who asks, do you think the people of Metrix are converting Aether into steam to power pretty much everything in their city, whether it be weapons or vehicles or just keeping the lights on?
So we actually got confirmation of this with Techno Boston's like little story thing. If I remember correctly, and I'm pretty certain I do, he said something along the lines of, we did all this without Aether. So it sounds to me, at the very least, like they're not powering things with Aether. They're actually harnessing things that we would in the real world, like steam and electricity. I can definitely see some element of Aether mixing into it, but I think... So I've had this theory that I mentioned on Twitter the other day, or X, whatever you want to call it. So we had someone say something along the lines of, oh, what do you think the next, you know, Fable is going to be? And I was like, I think it was Jump for Roy, Nathan, from legendarystories.net, great guy. He was like, oh, maybe Tennyton ore, which is the ore that is mined in Metrix, because Metrix is based around a lot of mining as well of this specific ore. Maybe a chunk of that would be the Fable. And this particular ore actually is what is used to make null rune equipment because it has Aether nullifying properties to it. So I had a feeling that because all the Fables that we've seen that are gems at the very least all appear to be pieces or related to each of the Asia of the different regions. So I thought maybe Tennyton ore, which seems to only be found in Metrix, is related to the Asia that is in that region, and that particular Asia has some sort of Aether nullifying properties just like the ore. So maybe within Metrix, Aether is less effective because of this sort of permeating Aether nullification stuff that's going on. So that's probably a reason why they didn't sort of use Aether to power a lot of their things. But then again as well, you do, for the most part, have to have something called Aether Affinity in order to actually control and weave magic. And that's meant to be a fairly rare thing, so it's probably not something that's reliable for an entire city to use for a power source. Unless you have just like a couple guys hooked up to like the power grid of Metrix and they're just, you know, channeling arcane energy through or something crazy like that, like some sort of conduit or battery. But yeah, I think we've gotten confirmation that it's all plain old technology that we would use in the real world. So
interesting.
Yeah.
What if the Fable's titanium bauble? Be pretty good. Pretty good. Pretty good.
A bauble that prevents arcane damage on top of it when you pitch, I don't know, something stupid like that.
William from the Table Pit, excellent YouTube channel. I don't know if he's trolling here, but says, obviously Mech and Brute are actually the same class. Everyone knows this, apparently, but I'd love to hear it in DeadSummer's own words.
I'll meet you halfway. Max Nitro is a Brute in mech clothing.
Interesting.
I'll say that just in terms of ideology, because he just wants to smash. He doesn't really seem to care too much about collateral damage, which is a very brute thing as well. I guess obviously the main difference is that he uses some technology, whereas most brutes that we've seen don't. And he goes fast, which brutes are not as fast as he probably is. But outside of that, yeah, I'd say he's kind of a brute in mecha clothing, I'd say.
Sure,
But
sure.
no, they're different classes, but I'll meet you halfway there.
Yeah. I mean, you know what, William? We'll talk when they do an alternate art of Wild Ride. That he's riding a motorcycle, and we'll
That'd be sick.
This question comes from Pat Shaw, which I believe we kind of really addressed it, but I'm going to read it anyway. There's been some discussion elsewhere that Metrix flies in the face of the traditional fantasy setting represented elsewhere in the world of Fab. Do you think Metrix fits with the rest of the world? We kind of covered it, but if you have anything else to add, I'll let you add it.
I mean, the really high technology stuff like computers, as I said before, is where most people sort of start to have a little bit of an issue with it. But stuff like steam power and like constructs, that's also found in many other fantasy settings. So Dungeons and Dragons, for example, anyone who's played like Baldur's Gate, the latest game, which is D&D, sort of set in the world of Faerun, which is a D&D setting. They've got constructs and sort of like steam power type stuff. I mean, there's a giant forge that you go into where you have to battle this massive construct, you know, that's kind of artificial intelligence to an extent, or magic, I guess they would use. Other popular things like World of Warcraft, you've got the goblins and gnomes, they're tinkerers, they use technology to an extent. I mean, they have big mechs that they drive around as well in that universe. Final Fantasy is kind of a bit of a wild card in that because they literally drive around in cars, but they've also got computers and guns and things like that. So maybe people are a bit too hung up on Flesh and Blood being pure traditional fantasy. And I think maybe it's a good thing that they kind of break the mold a little bit in that regard. Otherwise, it would be just like any other IP. And is that really something we want? Sure, maybe computers isn't the way that you want it to go, but it's probably better than just being another copy and paste of insert generic fantasy world from some book here, you know?
Sure.
So that's my opinion. And everyone, you know, you don't have to like it, but I don't think it's too far of a stretch to sort of be okay with it at the very least and be like, yeah, it's fine if I'm playing Rhinar with this club and I'm being shot at by a plasma pistol, you know, or an artillery cannon. You know, it's not too big of a deal. There could be other things that they include in the world of Flesh and Blood that could break that sort of fantasy trope even more than what we've currently got. Yeah, that's kind of my opinion on it. I mean, sci-fi is science fantasy. It's still fantasy to an extent. So, you know.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely. And something like maybe something I've been thinking about, right, is, well, maybe this technology sucks or everybody else is stronger, right? Like, because this tank is coming in for 6, so is this, or this tank's coming for 8, and so is this swing big. Is that a really strong brute, or is this a really bad tank? So like you kind of have to like, all right, so maybe everything else in the world is stronger, and maybe that's the reason why the technology has to exist to kind of even get to that point. So that could be a good way to look at it.
For sure.
Next question comes from Gary, aka Mr. Viz, as Sonata Phantasmia. Thoughts? Also, what would you like a yellow Sonata to do?
I really like the new Sonata. I don't know how good it is, but once again, I'm that type of player that would just put a card into his deck if he thinks it's cool. I'm going to try to find a way to make it work in Viscero. I mean, I have to. I'm a Viscero player. You know, I kind of have to pick up at least a playset of all of his specializations. In terms of a yellow Sonata, so we've got a red and a blue now. I did actually come up with something, and I think it would be fairly balanced. So obviously, it'd pitch for 2. It would block for 2. I think that's what all the Sonatas block for. And it would be XX, which is what all of them cost. And I've got it written down as a non-attack, like all the others. As an additional cost, destroy X rune chance. Your next attack gains +X, and when you attack with this, deal X arcane damage. So I can almost see it as destroying your rune chance to not only buff the physical side of your attack, but also to bundle the arcane damage that you would deal into one source, which makes it a lot harder to block. I think that would be pretty cool. I think it'd be fairly balanced as well, because not only do you have to pay XX, which is oftentimes quite hard to pay, but you also have to destroy X rune chance on top, which means you have to set up for it. So I honestly think that's pretty balanced. I'm quite proud of myself for coming up with that, because I was really struggling for a bit, and then I think maybe an hour before this episode I actually came up with that. But yeah, I could totally see that as a card that is printed at some point and would be pretty cool to play. Because, I mean, realistically, say you pitch 2 blues to pay for this, so X becomes 3, so you have to destroy 3 rune chance, your next attack gets +3, and when you attack, deal 3 arcane damage. Seems fair.
I think so.
You know?
Somebody will break it. That's all right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So. That one might be a little too... actually, you know what? Actually, regular, the original Sonata Arcanix is already busted with Skeleton, which is going to be in Living Legend format. So, like, whatever. Just give him some more toys.
Yep.
But, you know, it's funny. The only thing I would change about the Sonatas is an errata to say that bards can play them, because it's a Sonata, and I think that would make sense.
They need the song subtype.
Yes, yeah, give them a song subtype. And then the last bundle of questions here from Crixus, who asks, who do you think Max Nitro is? We kind of covered it. Is it somebody we already know or someone new? And then he also adds here, what's your favorite piece of lore / fun fact about the Fab universe as a whole?
So yeah, we did talk about Max Nitro. I did actually go back through Dash's lore the other day, because I remember in one of her like little short stories, I think it's called Needle in a Haystack, where she's like talking to all these other kids her age about sort of like some plans that they've got for like stealing something or along those lines. And there were a bunch of other kids there, and I was like, oh, is Max one of those kids that was there? No, he wasn't, unfortunately. So it definitely seems like this is the first time we've actually seen him before. Some people said maybe he's the same guy on T-Bone. I don't think he's the same guy on T-Bone. But the card, I think it's called Moonshot, which has him on a motorbike, is kind of like a throwback to T-Bone, because it looks very similar in terms of the artwork. In terms of like favorite lore, that's actually really hard. I love a lot of the lore. I think my favorite just has to be Lord Sutcliffe lore, just because I know the most about it, and I just think it's a really cool story of this individual that felt left out and an outsider within his family, who everyone else had Aether Affinity, but he didn't, and he really wanted it. So, you know, he started researching into forbidden knowledge, and then he got persecuted because of that, so he fled, and now he's out for vengeance, really, against the people that wronged him. But at the same time, he has to like deal with this new subject that he's kind of succeeded with, but has then betrayed him and cut his head off. So now he is this headless man who is sort of being carried around, and I'm very curious to see what he's actually going to do next. And yeah, I think Lord Sutcliffe definitely is probably the best answer for that. In terms of like other fun facts, I did make a video about some fun facts before. It was it was a video about just like lore mysteries that we hadn't fully gotten the answers to. And in there I did mention a couple of these things. So for example, if you go to the Flesh and Blood website, I'm sure I could probably do it right now. If you go find Young Viserai's artwork in the like retailer marketing assets section, the file name isn't called Young Viserai, it's called Young Malthus. So was that Viserai's name before he became Viserai? Was that Viserai's name in development? I haven't gotten any confirmation as of yet. I've kind of tried to prod LSS a little bit and be like, hey, you know, what is this? Is this intentional?
Yeah.
You know, just some other cool things as well, like Ira's artwork. If you find that on the website, I'm pretty actually, I think they might have changed that. But when you first found the artwork, it wasn't called Ira Crimson Haze. It was called Ira the Wilted, I think is what it was called. Which is actually quite flavorful because Ira's clan Ikaru, their symbol is a cherry blossom. And Ira's story is about her becoming corrupted by the blade of her ancestor, which is the Edge of Autumn, and how she's kind of going down this path of vengeance, and she's, kind of turning evil, so she's wilting. She's a flower of this clan that's wilting, which I thought was really cool. Obviously, they changed that name in development, but I thought that was very flavorful. But yeah, just small things like that, where just fun facts, like Dorinthia was kind of inspired by James White's late grandma, who I think her name was Dorothy or something along those lines. Or like Janice What You Need is a real person. Stuff like that. Just fun facts. Another thing as well, I didn't actually realize this. I saw a friend of mine posted on social media because they were in New Zealand. They were like, "Oh yeah, I'm just chilling out at the top of Coronet Peak," and I was like, "That's a real place."
I didn't know that either. Oh my god!
And I was like, "That's the headpiece for Icelander." I was like, "Oh my god!" I was like geeking out, and yeah, I didn't know Coronet Peak was an actual place in New Zealand. So cool things like that. There's a lot if you look into it, and apparently there's a lot of Easter eggs in the lore book and on the world map as well. But I haven't been bothered to go look specifically. So yeah.
I mean, there's a ton of stuff, and I'm sure there's so much on the cutting floor that will probably be revisited. I mean, this is something I talked to Brian Gottlieb about, like about card designs. Do they come back? I have to imagine the lore is the same way, and like, oh yeah, it didn't make sense at the time, but maybe now. Viscerai's old name might make a big appearance, but who the heck knows? But Kale, this was fun. Thank you again. This is a blast. I can't wait for the next one when it's hopefully Savage Lands. I don't know. Probably Mysteria before Savage Lands. Who knows? But we don't know. That's all I know, is we don't know. And but you've been great as always. You're a great bud, and love your spoiler video. It was awesome. And I'm not just saying that because I was in it. I would have thought it was cool regardless. But it's a great reveal, and you definitely bring the hype for every set, and that's pretty awesome. Pretty awesome. Now, can you plug anything you'd like to plug, my friend?
Sure. I mean, I've kind of plugged all my stuff before. At this point, you guys kind of know who I am, DeadSummerArt. Go watch my YouTube. That's all I really want. Just somewhat recently, I think like a couple months ago, I actually got over 1,000 subs, which was really cool. So I hit that milestone. That's a big one. Now I'm in the big leagues. Yeah, obviously plenty more stuff coming. I've been dedicating a lot of my time since our last chat for Dusk Till Dawn to the D&D sessions with the Living Legends crew. Go check that out. That's really cool. I spent so much time planning that, and we've got another one coming out soon. This one's going to be set in Metrix, obviously, with bright lights, and we're going to be having Rachel Stoddart come and join us.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, that'll be good. We'll have a mech joining our ranks, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Just go watch my stuff and enjoy it.
Well, if anybody hasn't checked it out, I implore them to, because Kale's content is awesome, and just keeps bringing the hits, and he's going to keep doing it, and he'll be back. Hopefully, he'll be back to talk about stuff on the next set, and hopefully this one doesn't creep up on us so fast. I felt like this one was like, it felt really short in between Dusk Till Dawn till now, which I guess is a good thing. Give us new things to talk about, but. You can all continue to find me on Twitter, X, at FreshBudsPod. Subscribe to the YouTube. Give us a like, comment, subscribe. Comment something wild. Who cares? Helps the algorithm. Buzz Discord, Patreon, all that fun stuff. It's in the link tree below. Got some food to talk about, Kale?
I was thinking about it. As I've said before, I'm not really one that tries new food too often. But I was like, what can I talk about? And then I was thinking, somewhat recently between Flake and DM Armada, there was a conversation about Skittles versus M&M. So I'm thinking maybe we could talk a little bit about confectionery or
Oh yeah,
candy,
yeah.
as you would call it in America. We kind of call it candy. We call it lollies here.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah.
What's your favorite? What's your go-to in down under?
Uh, I don't have it too often just because it will ruin my tongue and like destroy the taste buds on it. But I love warheads. In
Oh,
fact,
yeah.
for those that are watching on camera, I actually recently for the first time tried warheads. You guys would call it soda. I mean, it says soda on the can as well. This stuff is awesome. It's actually not that sour, but yeah, I love. What do I love?
It's funny.
We have something in us.
You said warheads and the gland started going already. I could
Yeah,
I feel
yeah,
it's
yeah.
like
You
you're
could already feel
preparing
it
for the sourness.
I don't know if you guys would have it in America, but we have. Do you guys have Cadbury chocolate?
Oh yeah, we have. It's not as popular, but it's definitely prevalent in some stores, especially like the higher end stores.
That's kind of like our main number one chocolate manufacturer here in Australia, and like a couple years back they released something called Caramilk, which is like a caramel milk chocolate, but it's kind of a mix between like caramel and white chocolate, and I love caramel and white chocolate, so this stuff is like liquid crack to me. Yeah, that's kind of what I vibe with the most. What do you vibe with over in America?
Oh man, gosh, I'm not a huge sweets guy, but I do enjoy them from time to time. Do you guys have mounds in
What's Mounds?
Mounds is dark chocolate with like candy coconut in the middle. That's my all-time favorite candy of all time. I will say Az sent me one time double deckers, which I believe is Cadbury, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And those were excellent. I like that kind of wafery kind of stuff. Yeah, I guess like that. I mean, I love black licorice. As weird. Some people don't, but like I love it. I don't know. We have these candies called Good and Plenty here in the States.
Good and Plenty.
Yeah. They're like come in like a little box. You usually buy them at the movie theater, right? Like so it's like movie theater candy, and they almost God, you probably don't have Mike and Ike's either, but
I've heard of Mike and Ike's. I don't know what it is, but
they just look like big pills, I guess, like but big candy little cylinder things. Okay. But the Good and Plenty's are white and like they have like a candy shell, like a white and pink candy shell, and inside is black licorice. And some people despise it, but I love it, and it's just like one of my favorite things. So, yeah.
There's like a little confectionery place in my town called the Sugar Boy, and they oftentimes import stuff, mostly from like the UK because it's British sort of themed, but there's also some US stuff. So I've tried things like I've tried a Twinkie before. That was all right, not too bad.
Yeah,
I've
survived
tried
a nuclear blast. Apparently, that's what they say.
I've tried Milk Duds. Milk Duds are all right, not too bad. I like the caramel. Everyone I hear about just absolutely despises candy corn. I like candy corn. It's not bad.
It's okay. Lady Fresh actually likes it. It's not my favorite. I'll have maybe like a handful every Halloween time, but like outside of that, I'm not like jonesing for it ever. But yeah, it's interesting. Have you heard of a Milky Way?
Oh yeah. We got Milky Ways here.
Yeah. Do you guys get the Milky Way Midnights in
Midnights? Is that like some sort of like dark chocolate version?
Chocolate version. I like dark chocolate. It's got like some white nougat in there and stuff like that.
Ooh.
It's really good. Yeah, but I don't know. I could probably talk about because Halloween's coming up. I'm like, oh yeah, candy. Let's do it. But this has been a blast, Kale. Thank you again so much. We of course ran out of time for Charmer. What can you do? But
talk too much about candy.
Yeah, we'll get to him next time. But thank you, everybody. I hope you're all enjoying your pre-releases and all that fun stuff, and enjoying opening the boxes. And see you next week with a set review. See ya.